Yo, 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 yo. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are back with Financial Blueprint. And today is going to be an interesting but much different type of conversation. Today, we're not talking about a lot of finances today. We are going to discuss the stock market and how the stock market reacted to the bombing of the United States to Iran this past weekend. But a lot of the conversations today is going to follow around the geopolitical issues that we're having currently right now between really Israel and Iran, and how the United States is now fully involved in that conflict. Right. So today, if you already don't know, breaking news is that the Iranians have bombed the United States bases that are in that Middle Eastern region, which we would call the CENTCOM region in the military, in response to the United States bombing their nuclear facilities over the past weekend. But before we get into all of the breaking news as of right now, we need to unpack how this even happened and how the Iranians got to a place where they were bombing Israel, but now they are now responding to the United States and now bombing the United States. So let's start with President Trump and his actions that he took, as well as our brave military members this past weekend, and how they responded in kind to Iranians' nuclear facilities. Let's pack into it. Let's get to it.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
So President Trump addressed the nation on Saturday night here. I think it was around 10 p.m. I was out, out with some friends. We went out and we were actually at a restaurant eating, and we got the notification that the United States bombed Iran. And at that moment, a lot of different opinions, let me just say that, a lot of different opinions on what just happened when it came to the United States as well as Iran, right? So in the beginning, we know that Israel and Iran don't really get along, right? To say the least, right? We're not going to get into why, right? But we know that the conflict between Iran and Israel has been going on for a long time. And we know recently it has then escalated into a lot of strikes on Iranian cities as well as Israel. Within this timeline, there has been reports that Iranian's nuclear program is being promoted to a new level, to where they possibly could have, a nuclear weapon. In the history of this conflict, the United States has continuously, over and over again, backed Israel, as well as been a deterrent when looking at Iran to possibly having a nuclear weapon, because Iran has continuously stated that they're willing to use it, not just to take out Israel, but to take out, United States and other countries and other allies. We know that there are a lot of countries around the world that have nuclear weapons. Obviously, Russia has the most. United States is very, very shortly behind them. China, France, go on and on. UK, North Korea, everybody, right? The difference is that most of all, if not all, those countries are not willing to use those nuclear weapons unless it's a last resort type of situation. The Iranians have made it very, very, they are vocalized the fact that they're willing to use their nuclear weapons if they were to receive or willing to get one, if their program escalates to that level, which is why President Trump, as which he, stated, took the approach of, taking out some of their facilities in case the credible possibility of them having nuclear weapons, right? So we have to think psychology right now. If we have let's say a wounded animal, let's say you attack a wounded animal, and that animal, and I'm not using animal in a derogatory, in a bad way. It's a psychology, because this plays into the response, right? We know that the Iranian people, as well as their leader, right, they're prideful. We know that they have been trying to, get a nuclear weapon for a very long time. And when you take a person and you put them in a corner and you take some of their things away, there's only two ways you can respond. You can either say, you know what, I want peace, and I don't want no more smoke. I'm just going to back off. The other side of that is, I'm just going to put all my chips on the table and we just going to go for it, right? Because if I've been the leader, their supreme leader has been in power for a very long time. We're talking about 1980, I believe 89, right? If the supreme leader has been trying to work on this program for a very long time, has been trying to build up the Iranian power, as well as the country's influence around that region, and you take away the one thing that I've been trying to build, I spent $5 billion or so on this nuclear program and you take me out. Not just you take me out, but you did it when we were sleeping and we didn't even see it coming. What do you think they were going to do? Right? But before we get to that, we got to understand one thing. The United States military is significantly better than what most people think it is. Let me just say this. The United States military, the technology, the training, the expertise is second to none. We can go about traveling in the nighttime. You won't see us coming. You won't even know that it's even happening until it's already happened. It's over for you. It's over. Sure, we can say that, we have gotten weaker in different ways, that we're not the same way we were 20, 30 years ago. You can say a lot of things, but the one thing that you can't say is that the United States military ain't uniquely positioned to execute at a high level when needed to. That's the one thing that has been proven to be true. So more than anything else, Donald Trump, our president, has, and then the Joint Chiefs, as well as the military personnel, God bless our military personnel, our airmen, our Navy, our special ops, right, our Army personnel, our Marines, etc. They have proven without a shadow of a doubt that we like that when it comes to operational excellence. We have our flaws, but that is something that we cannot debate, right? So the stock market, how does the stock market react to a situation where the United States bombs another country, right? Most people will believe that the market would react in a negative way. And I'm here to tell you, that's actually not what happened. That's not what actually happened. Take a look.
Futures are muted this morning. This after the U.S. conducted strikes on Iran's nuclear sites for insights now on how this could play out in the markets this week. I want to bring in Jeremy Siegel, Professor Emeritus at Finance at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, also Chief Economist at Wisdom Tree. Good morning to you. I think there were a lot of people worried over the weekend about how the markets might react this morning. They seem to be reacting actually quite well. I know that you've been a little bit negative, and you are normally quite positive. So I'm curious sort of how you're reacting right now.
Well, certainly you're right. If you went to bed Friday and then you woke up this morning and looked at the markets, you would absolutely say, well, nothing happened over the weekend. It really was quite remarkable. I think it's a balance of things. I mean, first of all, we don't know how much damage was done. But at least we didn't crash in the desert the way we did 45 years ago when we tried an operation in Iran. I mean, it was successful that way. Israel's taking out, Iran's offensive capabilities was, quite impressive. I think everyone's saying, what is the next step? First of all, we're looking at the Gulf of Hormuz. If you look at Polymarket, and I just did that, they give a 23% probability that Iran will try to close the Gulf, but that is by July, so that's only 7 or 8 days away. They say there's still a low probability. But I think the question is, what is Israel satisfied with? Is this what their final goal is, or is there more? And what are they going to do about it? Should we push our attention towards neutralizing the Houthis and bringing back shipping to the Red Sea and ensuring the shipping, of course, in Hormuz? I mean, and those are questions that I have going forward. But I think that sort of, we did a successful run. Listen, whatever damage was done, I think most people agree they are farther away from producing a bomb than they were on Friday. And that's positive for the markets and, positive basically for eventual settlement in the Middle East. So that's sort of offsetting the fear, well, what will Iran and its proxies do? And, I don't know when we're going to get an answer on that. Maybe conversation will turn back to the Fed and the tariffs, which certainly dominate.
So really quickly, we got to understand how the stock market operates, right? So normally, you would think that a bomb that is being hit on multiple sites across Iran's country by the United States would cause a level of panic in the market, right? And in a sense, that's true. But the stock market is emotionally a little different from the standpoint that the market is always looking forward. It's always looking forward, not necessarily what's going on right now. So when the gentleman says that the market is reacting positively because the United States taking out these facilities is being seen as a positive when it comes to the future nuclear possibilities that the Iranian people would have, is a positive. So the S&P 500 and the stock market as a whole today actually went up rather than a negative panic reaction for a negative red day, right? So how you can justify the stock market moving and how you look at it has to be a little different than how a normal human being would operate when it comes to, oh my God, we just bombed the country, red in the stock market the next day. That's not necessarily how the stock market works. And in history, when something happens, a conflict happens overseas, or a war happens, the stock market has not always reacted negatively to war per se, because war can actually make money. If you didn't know, right? Defense contractors make a lot of money. Countries do make money. Oil goes up, which means, it is more expensive for us to buy gas and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean the stock market will go down ultimately because of that conflict. However, this is the other side though. If we were to get into a major conflict where United States soldiers were being killed and boots on the ground within a country, now that's a whole different situation, because again, the market is looking forward. And if the market sees the possibility of war from a standpoint of the United States, it has boots on ground, soldiers on ground, conflicts on a daily basis, then that's a different situation than in this situation, which it was just a few few facilities. The Iranian nuclear program has been weakened. That's actually a positive for the market as a whole. And that is why the market actually went up today versus a red day.
They did the news before the Israeli strikes.
Right. I think the question that folks in the equity market are trying to grapple with is sort of either this is a massive success, in which case you would think that this has actually put us in a much better place and therefore maybe longer term there's more security, or this puts you, and I don't know where Jamie Dimon's thinking about this morning, but he's talked about the risks in the system for a very long time. And now if you think that there's a prospect of retaliation, if you think that there's the prospect of something happening in the Straits of Hormuz, or by the way, how this affects even the negotiations over trade and other things that China is going to have with the U.S., which I think is a whole other story, whether that adds to your list of anxieties.
Yeah, but I think you said, both things have been enhanced. The probability, hey, this is a success to neutralize Iran. That's positive against the risks of retaliation, which is negative. Well, so why you're seeing the market really flat is the positive and the potential negatives have sort of both gone up at the same time, and the middle has shrunk on that. A show of force such as Israel did and the U.S., also might give China some pause on what its potential intentions are for Taiwan. That's a longer run issue that we know is on the table. Just a show of successful military action is considered a show of force and positive for the U.S. That's a positive action too.
So that point is so important. It's so key, right? There are more things at play here than just what we see on television, right? that he was saying that the United States executing a military operation successfully, in the way that they successfully maneuvered in this operation, meaning no one knew it was coming, right? That shows not just the Iranian people, but other countries around the world like China, Russia, North Korea, etc., that the military from the United States perspective is effective, right? So when we start talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, when we start talking about the possibility of, in a few years, China doing what Russia did with Ukraine, but actually doing doing it with what they say is a Chinese, nation, which is Taiwan, right? The Chinese want to do very similar to what Russia did with Ukraine. They want to do it with Taiwan. The United States is a ally of Taiwan, right? So we, similar to what we did with Ukraine, would assist Taiwan in a conflict with China. Now, again, this is a very detailed conversation, a very layered discussion, because one thing does affect another thing, and then it affects another thing, right? At some point, if the United States were to challenge China, because China wants to take over Taiwan, then that is something that, from a militaristic standpoint, the United States have to show we are competent, we are excellent, we can provide, support as well as operational excellence when it comes to our, relationships, our partners, in this case, Israel, and that in another case, Ukraine. And then in that case, when it comes to China, Taiwan, that we are willing to do X, Y, and Z in a way that you might not be able to defend yourself against, right? It is a message and a show of force, similar to what the gentleman is saying, that the United States did execute at a high level this past weekend, right? So when you're considering these things and you're thinking about these things, there are multiple different things happening all at the same time.
So I think that you have this balance of these positives plus the fear of what Iran is going to be, balance each other off right now.
Does that mean sit on your hands? I mean, usually the reason why the market is flat is because there's some people on one side taking a very strong bet that things are going higher, and some folks who are saying, I'm not playing along.
Well, I'm actually, I believe there are positive trends. I've said now for, more than a month that the market believes that it could deal with a 10% general tariff, 30% on China. If it doesn't get worse, no going back to Liberation Day rates, they think they can negotiate it. And, I'm not surprised at the positive trend. In fact, I would not at all be surprised to see in the next couple of weeks, again, assuming no big action by Iran, which, by the way, would bring about a big reaction from the U.S. And really, debilitate Iran. Saying that if that does not happen, then new all-time highs in the S&P are certainly attainable over the next several weeks.
So we were just told that as of this morning, the market was up, and in early afternoon. And this gentleman spoke about the fact that as long as Iran does not respond, the stock market over the next couple of weeks should be able to go up to new highs. At that moment, at about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, there was no Iran attack on the United States. It was just what happened over the weekend. But we know, as of right now, because it's breaking news everywhere, that Iran responded in kind. And again, going back to what I stated before, Iran was attacked by a country that they're not directly in war with, we're not even in attacking with, We are attacking, and I'm just from an Iran's perspective, we're attacking Israel, right? We're not attacking the United States. We were just attacked. It was like a double team. I'm getting jumped out here in these streets. I just got jumped. How am I supposed to respond to that? I cannot, as a supreme leader, and this is the truth, I cannot, as a supreme leader, do nothing. If I get attacked by a country and I do nothing, I look weak. And if I look weak, I lose my constituents and I lose the people that follow me because I did not respond to someone attacking not just me, but the country that I'm in charge of. So to see what we're about to witness, Iran respond to attacking United States bases across the Middle East, across the CENTCOM region, in Qatar and other bases like that, to me is not surprising at all. Because them saying, well, we surrender is not something that we have really seen in their history. We have seen them in some way, shape, or form, either threats, if it's proxy, if it's guerrilla warfare, I'm going to use a proxy connection over here to attack, the United States bases over there, or I'm going to attack the United States embassy, or I'm going to figure out a way to, use my relationships in the region to influence ways of indirect approaches. I'm going to find a way. But as of today, they did something a little different. They went direct. Let's take a look.
Let me bring in MSNBC military analyst, retired Colonel Jack Jacobs. Jack, this was the question. What would Iran consider to retaliate for the massive attack that was launched and unprecedented attack launched by the U.S.? Again, we're getting this from Iranian state TV, but we have 3 new pieces of information that I want to get your reaction to. One is this attack. The second is that sirens are sounding not just at that base, but in Bahrain and Kuwait as well. And you have the president, defense secretary, and other key members of the administration in the Situation Room.
Well, the report was that there were half a dozen missiles, and we don't know how accurate that is. But clearly, if you wanted an off-ramp, to use the old trite expression, and you were Iran, you'd fire a bunch of missiles and be done with it and hope that was going to be the end of it. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. One report was that they were headed towards our air base in Qatar, where, by the way, we have 10,000 troops or thereabouts.
Forward position of U.S. Central Command, 10,000 troops.
Correct. A likely target. But if sirens are also being heard in Bahrain and Kuwait, we have naval forces stretch all across the Middle East as well. It may mean that there are other missiles, which means that Iran has decided that it's not necessarily looking for a way to get off of this, get out of this problem, but in fact are raising the stakes. The trouble for Iran is that it's kind of stuck. It's got to do something. It thinks in order to demonstrate that it's not weak. Don't forget, it's got a domestic audience as well, not the people, but the Republican guards, who in many respects may in fact be lots less progressive even than the mullahs, on the one hand, and the rest of the world also, though it's their domestic audience that they've got to be most concerned about. And second, to make sure that the United States understands that it's capable of responding to preclude further Western attacks. But if it really ups the ante by killing American troops, by sending multiple attacks out there in multiple places that also, by the way, damage people like the Qataris who are acting as intermediaries.
I want to make something very clear. The United States has bases all over the Middle East, right? We have soldiers that are deployed, it's the right term to use, in rotation every year all over the CENTCOM, Middle East region, all over the place. Qatar, Iraq, Kuwait, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, etc. I just named at least 6 countries that the United States have bases in. And if you look at the map, Iran is not that far from any of them. It's right there. They're all very much in, a few hours distance. So a ballistic missile, any type of long range, missile can come in contact with these locations. And this is not a game. This is very serious. Iran, if they wanted to, and they have, can send missiles over to women and men, brothers in arms when it comes to the United States, and cause harm to the people that serve our nation. It's one thing when we bomb in facilities and we bomb in, weapons depots, and we bomb in, different locations, that storage locations, etc. It's a different story when you start bombing soldiers, when you start bombing people, and it get escalated, right? Luckily, the United States was able to shoot all of these missiles out the sky and did not cause any harm to any soldiers. The question for today is, are we at war? And what I mean by we, I'm talking about the United States of America. Are we at war? I would say at the moment, no. But that can change very quickly. If a United States soldier gets killed due to a missile strike from the Iranians, that could change very quickly. This whole situation can go from, we're at 2 or 3, we're going to get to 10 real fast, right? So the fact that the United States was able to, shoot out these missiles out the air, no soldiers was impacted. The region is very much protected when it comes to the Air Force Base, as well as the Army bases that we have over in the Middle East. We know the heightened security after this past weekend and the attacks that the United States had on the Iranian nuclear facilities. We know that region has been heightened when it comes to the, sensitivity and the alert when it comes to, the soldiers that's over there. But this becomes a very different situation if a missile hits a United States base, directly hits the United States base, and soldiers are killed and impacted, and families lost their loved ones due to a missile that directly came from Iran, and they publicly stated that they did it, right? Just keep that in mind as we move forward when it comes to this situation and how the United States will operate and the decisions that the president will make, as well as the Joint Chiefs, the generals, etc., the people that are in that room making these decisions, and what they need to take in consideration when it comes to, how or when the United States get into a direct conflict, possible boots on ground situation. And if that ever happens, that will not be good for anybody.
Then, in fact, all bets are off. And the likelihood of an American response that the Iranians did not anticipate, something really, really big, becomes greater. Don't forget, the Iranians are looking at the United States and come to the conclusion that the guy who's got his finger on the button is unpredictable. Well, if you're looking at somebody who's an adversary who's unpredictable, what you probably don't want to do is make them angry. And it depends on how long this attack is going to be, how widespread it's going to be, and whether or not it's going to stop after this attack. But if a lot of American troops are hurt, then all bets are off.
There is an Iranian semi-official news agency, Tasnim. They are saying that Iran has launched missile operations, what is called Basharat al-Fath, against U.S. bases in Qatar and Iraq. This basically translates to glad tidings of victory. The operation code phrase is Ya Aba Abdillah, which is a reference to Imam Hussein. So when you talk about messaging and the importance of the domestic audience that the Ayatollah and the people around him are most concerned about, just the name of it will tell you something. But let's consider more specifically the dangers here of escalation, because what the message was from supporters of the president, this was going to potentially just shut it down. This is not shutting it down.
Well, they keep talking about, the administration keeps talking about this being a war against the nuclear capability of Iran. And of course, that's where the attacks were. By the way, as an aside,
let me stop you for just a second, because Courtney Cubey, who is our reporter at the Pentagon, has gotten in front of a camera now. Talk to us about what we know about these bases. And very importantly, we've heard a lot over the last 36 hours or so about the defenses that are in place. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the main bases that we're talking about here is Al Udeid. That's in Doha. It's this sprawling, enormous air base that is actually owned by the Qataris, but the U.S. military has been there with thousands of troops operating off that base, largely airmen, for years now. Now, it does have extensive air defense systems in it. That's with ground-based systems, which we've been hearing a lot about in recent days, that have the ability to shoot down not only incoming missiles, but also drones. But they also have multiple fighter squadrons there, fighter jets, that have the ability to go up in the air and shoot down incoming as well. We've seen them do that in recent months, U.S. aircraft up shooting down incoming drones, and they can even take down certain missiles, Chris. So that is the defense that they have on the base. It is, as I said, an enormous sprawling base right in Qatar. But there are other U.S. military installations that also are in the area that are well within the reach of Iran. One is the head of the U.S. Navy in the Middle East, known as Fifth Fleet. It's in Bahrain. There is also there are bases in Iraq as well, multiple bases there that have also come under attack in recent months from Iranian proxy groups, well within, obviously, range of Iran if they were to decide to go after one of those. Remember, Iran has actually targeted U.S. troops and the installation at al-Assad, which is in western Iraq. After the attack on Qasem Soleimani, they retaliated with a number of ballistic missile drones striking that base, causing a number of injuries among U.S. service members, primarily in traumatic brain injuries. Those are three of the main ones that we're looking at. But, Chris, there are a number of other installations there. And we cannot forget, we're not just talking about the U.S. military assets that exist on land. There are U.S. Navy ships at sea. They are also well within range. These are the sorts of assets that we're looking at right now. We're aware of the information that's coming across the semi-official Iranian news agencies. But at this point, the defense officials we're speaking to have not been able to substantiate any actual attack beginning. But a U.S. official that I spoke with did say that they were warned about the possibility of an imminent threat against a number of U.S. military bases in the region. That includes some of the ones I spoke with in Qatar, in Iraq, and in Bahrain and elsewhere. Chris?
Thank you so much.
So that's just an update from MSNBC when it comes to the Iranian attack on U.S. bases across that Middle Eastern region. Reports say that they have, attacked Qatar, Kuwait, as well as Bahrain. And if you look at the map that we had up earlier, it basically gives you a screenshot of how close some of these locations are when it comes to the region, and how, I'm not going to say easy. I'm going to just say it's not that difficult to launch missiles across, a few 3,000 miles to these U.S. bases in that CENTCOM region. Right. The bases are very much well protected. The U.S., Air Force bases are extremely protected. They have as much as you would need when it comes to anti-defense, as well as, offensive missiles. So we just had the MSNBC review on the Iranian strike on U.S. bases. Now we're going to get a Fox News update on that same situation, and let's see what they have to say over at Fox.
Let's now switch to Israel. Go to our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yanks. He's live in Tel Aviv with the latest, not only from Israel, but what do you make of the fact that this appeared to be a pretty limited response, Trey?
Yeah, John, good afternoon. We're getting more information from regional sources right now on this Iranian attack targeting the Al Udeid air base just outside of Doha, Qatar. The latest information that we have, according to the Qatari Foreign Ministry, they say these missiles were intercepted over the Qatari capital of Doha. They say there are no injuries on the ground, and the Qataris are condemning this attack launched by Iran. This is significant, but not unexpected. The distance between Qatar and Iran is just over 100 nautical miles, and this is a large base, the largest American base in the region, and it had largely been evacuated, according to one source that we spoke with before this attack took place. The Americans understood that Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain could be on the top target list for the Iranians in any sort of response following those strikes that were ordered by President Trump to go after Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. We're working to get some confirmation about reports that American bases in Iraq may have been targeted. But again, the information that we have about the Gulf is significant. There are air defense systems in Qatar, both the THAAD missile defense system and the Patriot system. And according to some initial video that we reviewed from sources in Doha, it looks like, if not all, but the majority of these incoming missiles were shot down overhead. In terms of what led up to this, we know earlier today, the U.S. Embassy in Doha sent out an alert to American citizens in Qatar to shelter in place. Shortly after that, the airspace over this country was closed. You could see on flight radar maps a number of flights diverting to other regional airports. And again, that condemnation coming in from the Qataris. We're also monitoring Iranian state media at this hour, who says that they launched this attack, calling it the annunciation of victory. Iranian state media also saying their military says this was a devastating and powerful attack. This is not unexpected propaganda to receive from the regime in Tehran, but again, an indication that the Iranians are looking to save face following this U.S. strike that went after their nuclear facilities over the weekend. Other regional countries, including Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE, do remain on high alert at this hour over concern that there could be further attacks on U.S. interests in the region. Of course, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. There are also thousands of American forces in Kuwait. And then the possibility that Iraq could be targeted as well. I can take you back to 2020 when the Americans ordered that drone strike against Qasem Soleimani outside of Baghdad's international airport. The Iranians responded then with 13 ballistic missiles against the Ain al-Assad air base in western Iraq. And so, of course, missile defense systems across the region remain on high alert. Again, the Americans knew this was a possibility and largely evacuated much of their personnel from these areas. John, Sandra?
All right, just going through the Qatar response here. Qatar saying it reserves the right to respond after this Iranian attack. As John just reported, Qatar is saying no casualties from that attack at the U.S. military base. Thank goodness. And the top security body there, Iran's top security body there, is saying armed forces used the same number of bombs that the U.S. had used in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. That is per the latest statement that we've been digesting, Trey. Please do weigh in on that. As John and I were just discussing, is what we're seeing, is this evidence of diminished capabilities on the part of Iran?
Look, the types of missiles that the Iranians are likely using against American interests in Qatar, as Jennifer noted, are some from their shorter range arsenal. Cruise missiles or possibly medium-range ballistic missiles, but not the same missiles that they were using over the past 11 days to target major Israeli population centers. A Qatari source just sending me another statement that I do want to just read here live from a spokesman for Qatar's foreign minister saying, "We reaffirm that dialogue is the only way to overcome the current crisis and ensure the security in the region and the peace of its people remains." And so the Qataris still, amid all of this, encouraging diplomacy and dialogue in the region. They have been one of the leaders in the Middle East over the past more than 600 days, trying to de-escalate regional tension, bring all parties to the table, and ultimately find some sort of off-ramp, ceasefire agreements, or at least temporary understandings. But as this war develops between Israel and Iran, there is concern that this could spiral and continue, because we heard from President Trump directly, we heard from the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, that any attack on American interests in the region would be met with a response. Everyone from American officials to current and former Israeli officials warned Iran against such an attack taking place. Now, while this is limited in nature, it certainly does bring this entire conflict into a new chapter and raises questions about how the Americans might respond to this direct attack on their largest military base in the Middle East. This is a base that normally houses around 10,000 U.S. personnel. We have reported from the Al Udeid base just outside of Doha. It's about a 30-minute drive from the U.S. Embassy in the Qatari capital. And it's a place where there is a lot of coordination for U.S. Central Command. You might remember back in 2021 when those evacuation flights were taking place. Many of them were landing from Kabul, Afghanistan to Doha, Qatar at this airbase. And so it's a base that was built in the late 90s. It cost around $1 billion to build. And it is still owned by the Qataris, but it is, again, the largest American base in the region. And there is close coordination for U.S. Central Command done out of this base. It was largely evacuated before this took place. And again, according to a spokesman for Qatar's foreign ministry, no one was injured in this missile strike launched by Iran. But again, this shows that the Iranians are willing to respond directly to American interests in the region. And even before the war between Israel and Iran erupted 11 days ago, with this Israeli strike starting against the top IRGC officials, Iranian nuclear scientists, and of course, Iran's nuclear program, the United States was preparing for this possibility. You might remember about 2 weeks ago, President Trump ordered a partial evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. There was a voluntary evacuation for the dependents of U.S. Embassy personnel and military spouses and children in places like Bahrain and Kuwait. The United States understood that as a war would develop between Israel and Iran, that U.S. interests in the region could come under attack. And of course, with those U.S. strikes against the Iranian nuclear facilities, those 3 facilities over the weekend, the officials here have been bracing for such a response. Israeli officials, though, remain on high alert, understanding that this is certainly not the end of Iranian response as it relates to Israel. But as for American forces in the region, again, the latest information that we can report attributable to Qatari officials is that there were no injuries in these strikes that took place just earlier this hour. And there is initial reporting coming in right now from the New York Times indicating that Iran coordinated the attacks with the American air base in Qatar, and Qatari officials gave advance notice that the attacks were coming to minimize the casualties. Again, that information attributable to the New York Times, but this is not surprising because they did a very similar coordination back in 2020 in response to the killing of Qasem Soleimani, that drone strike that President Trump ordered. This was meant to contain possible escalation in the region. And
That's so important. So we talk about Iranian propaganda from the standpoint that if I am the supreme leader, I have to show a force. I have to show that I am not weak. So I have to then respond to you attacking me. But this is interesting. They basically told beforehand the Qatar, their relationship with Qatar, hey, we're about to go and do something to United States bases. They told him, right? That's what the gentleman is reporting. If the reports are true, allegedly, they told Qatar that we're about to send missiles. We have this relationship with you guys, but this base is on your land. I gotta let you know beforehand that this is about to happen. Qatar then told the United States, hey, I got reports from my connect that this is about to happen. So get your anti-defense missiles ready. So was the goal for Iran to actually damage the United States physically, right? Or was the goal to show that we're not weak and that we will respond in kind if we need to, if y'all continue to send us missiles? Because the United States was able to shoot them out of the sky. So if the reports are true, allegedly, then the goal was never to actually hit in a United States military base. The goal was to show force and to show publicly that we're not weak and we will, if need be, send missiles over to y'all if y'all continue to get involved in this conflict that doesn't have anything to do with you, but has everything to do with Israel and Iran. You got to pay attention to details, because a lot of times what happens in the media is they promote what they promote, and they will, spotlight specific things but a lot of the truths aren't really talked about publicly, right? What government does and what other governments do, to be honest, the majority of the things we will never know. If you're not in that room, in that space to receive information, receive intel, right? Top secret clearance and things like that, when it comes to classified information, you probably will never know publicly. But in certain situations, when you start to hear reports was sent to this country, and this country then reported to this country to prepare for the possibility of missiles being sent out. And then you have on X, on Twitter, you got the Iranian, PR sending messages like, hey, we're about to attack United States bases, right? You understand that a lot of this is propaganda at its highest level. A lot of this is just public image. We got to make sure that that y'all know that, the world knows that we're not weak, that you can't just come over here and bomb us without us responding, right? We might not necessarily want to really get into a fight with y'all directly, so we're going to let y'all connections know, and then y'all connections going to let you know that this is about to happen. Shoot them out of the sky. Okay, cool. You bombed us. We bombed you. All right. This might be the end of the story. Might be the end of the story, right? So just take that in consideration when we're even talking about this, and we are figuring this out or trying to pinch through some of these things, that this might not necessarily be a major conflict when it comes to the United States and Iran, but Iran showing not just the U.S., but to other countries around the world that we are not weak and we are willing to fight back if you attack us, in a current situation. Last but not least, we are still currently seeing Iran and Israel just absolutely punish each other. Missiles continuously being sent over to, Iran. Missiles being continuously sent over to Israel. Even currently, right now, in this day, after the situation with the United States, Iran is still bombing Israel. Let's look at it.
Of targets in and around the capital of Tehran. Smoke could be seen rising from the Iranian capital, and the IDF saying those earlier strikes went after underground military infrastructure, missile storage sites, and UAV storage sites. We do expect these Israeli strikes to continue. Again, at this hour, we can report there are jets over Iranian territory striking different targets at this moment. But these will likely continue as the Israelis come under more ballistic missile fire from Iran. Early this morning, 2 different waves of missile strikes targeted this country, going after infrastructure in the south and residential areas in the north. Israeli officials say they'd like this war to be over in a matter of days, but they are preparing for the possibility that this drags out for weeks. John, Sandra?
So, Trey, let's go to the politics of Iran itself. Via the sources that you've talked to into the region, I'm wondering what you're picking up that's going inside the country, because when a regime is at the tipping point, you usually get some pretty good indications that that's about to happen. Syria, for example, there were pretty obvious signs that things were not going well for Assad, and then suddenly it tipped over into a regime change. We saw the same thing in Afghanistan when the Taliban swept out the Afghanistan government. Do you get a sense that Iran is anywhere near a tipping point here? Or do the authorities in charge now, led, I guess, by the IRGC, still have a pretty good handle on all the levers of power there?
Look, Israeli officials say they still have a pretty good handle on the situation in Tehran. But it's important to note the Israelis have gone after much of the military leadership, trying to decimate top commanders from the IRGC. And the strike today on the American base outside of Doha, Al Udeid, is a significant development, but it's also a coordinated development. The Americans knew there would be some response from the Iranians following these strikes that were ordered by President Trump over the weekend against Iran's key nuclear facilities. And this is in part because the Iranians are looking to save face domestically. They're under immense domestic political pressure. We have seen the images of Iranian civilians, millions of them evacuating the capital of Tehran, lines of traffic as people tried to get out of the way. Earlier today, the Israelis released an infographic showing an IRGC command center in the heart of Tehran, urging Iranian civilians to stay away from these facilities. It's hard to get a real sense of the feelings from the civilian population, given the fact that the regime has cracked down on internet access there, and people have very limited ability to speak to the outside world. But as this moves forward, there is still a political chain of command that exists. You have the Ayatollah Khamenei, who has reportedly appointed successors if needed, but you also have President Masoud Pezeshkian and his deputies who have not been killed in the Israeli strikes. The Israeli strikes have gone after military leadership so far, and they've been precise in a way that they have used their intelligence apparatus here in Tel Aviv to track down these military commanders in an effort to weaken Iran's ability to fire back at Israel. And while we certainly have seen that, there are fewer missiles flying through the skies of Israel in recent days, they still have the ability to coordinate these counterattacks. And so we saw the ballistic missile attack this morning that targeted those installations in the south of Israel and also residential areas in the north. And then just last hour, this attack against a U.S. base in Qatar. The key here is the missile supply and the ability to launch these missiles. It is not surprising that they used short and medium range missiles in the attack today on the U.S. base in Qatar, because the Israelis have been going after their long-range missile supply. They have tried to take out as many of the launching positions as possible, and the Iranians have had to systematically start moving where they're firing the missiles from because the Israelis have control over the skies of Tehran and the surrounding areas. And again, as we can report at this hour, Israel is currently striking targets in and around Tehran, an indication that they will keep up this air campaign in the hours and days ahead. And I'm checking with sources here in the region to try to get an understanding about the current security alert in the Gulf right now, because there is concern that this event retaliating against the United States, directly targeting a U.S. base that normally houses around 10,000 American soldiers, may not be over. And so everyone here is in a high state of alert. The Israelis as well, certainly coordinating intelligence behind the scenes with the Americans as this operation continues. But remember, we learned from Israeli sources over the past 2 days that ahead of the American strikes that took out, in part, these nuclear facilities in Iran, there was an effort by the Israelis to take out the air defense systems of the Iranian regime, not only to clear the path for American bombers, but also to make it easier to put this pressure on the regime, the political leadership that's left in Tehran, understanding that once you take out the majority of their nuclear program and once their ballistic missile program is decimated, all they have left is turning to their proxies in the region. And over the past year and a half, amid the Israeli campaign against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the American and Israeli campaign against the Houthis in Yemen, Israeli strikes against Hamas and Islamic Jihad inside Gaza, and ongoing limited attacks against Iranian proxies, these Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, their proxy ability has also been decimated. And so they're running out of buttons to push. And so they can still launch these counterattacks as they have done today, but they don't have an unlimited supply of missiles. And both the Israelis and the Americans know that.
Okay.
So, just to summarize what the gentleman is saying, is that Iran was using proxies, and proxies basically mean little, groups and connections that they have in the region to, from a guerrilla warfare standpoint, attack and do other things that would weaken not just Israel, but, some of the U.S., connections that they have in that Middle Eastern region. But I want to get into, last but not least, and we're gonna understand. So understand this, right? So Israel and Iran are, they fighting, right? We're in support of Israel, obviously. Iran does have support. We got to understand Iran has support from countries like Russia, as well as China and North Korea, right? So they're not alone. But those other countries have not, as of today, waged in on anything when it comes to the situation. They have, like Putin has publicly said something about, we need peace in that region and we need to stop X, Y, and Z. China has made a statement also, but there has not been any real active assistance when it comes to those countries. So we would hope, and we need, this is what we need the Israel and Iran situation to come to a halt. Are we at war? The question again is, are we at war? The answer is no. Not today. Doesn't mean that it's going to change tomorrow. It just means that as of today, the answer is no, right? But I want to end this with the money. Let's get back to the finances. Let's get back to the money. And how do we invest in this situation, knowing that we have missiles, we have, a lot of supplies being used, we got a lot of, weapons being utilized? How do we take advantage? Because at all times, as an investor, you need to be thinking about opportunities. And how do we take advantage of these opportunities? Well, who supplies the weapons is my first question. As an investor, who's the company? What companies are going to make money and that they're going to supply? Because all of this stocks, all these weapons need to be refurbished, right? We need to continue to buy. We got to continue to buy. We got to spend millions and billions of dollars to make sure that we have enough weapons, enough missiles, enough guns, enough, ammo, just in case somebody somebody got some problems. Well, you got to look into the defense contractors, right? Lockheed Martin. You have Palantir, which is the new technology, and how United States and other countries are using the new technology to assist in their weapons as well as their defense, right? How does countries attack the United States? A lot of times they do it through cyber warfare, right? So the United States, as much as we have positive, we have good technology when it comes to cyber on an offensive standpoint, but we struggle at times when it comes to cyber attacks, and we've seen that over the last couple of years on different companies, airlines, etc., being attacked. So cyber, companies, when it comes to CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, Zscaler, things like that, right? Cyber companies that assist when it comes to that defense technology when it comes to cyber, right? So, defense contractors, you can look into, cyber companies, cybersecurity companies, and take advantage of the times that we live in, right? We know that, from a humanity standpoint, we just like to go to war. We just do. Peace is not really something that is a consistent theme. It's usually always something that's happening. And defense contractors and weapon suppliers and things like that are the ones that usually make the billions of dollars because of it, right? If it's aircraft, if it's jets, if it's ammo, if it's weapons, if it's vehicles, right? If it's missiles, etc. Who makes those items? You got to look into that, see who's ultimately making the most money, who has the contracts with the government, who's ultimately making the billions of dollars, and take advantage of investing in those companies so that you can make money when it comes to your stock portfolio, right? So as we sit and we talk about conflicts within, countries, we talk about bombing when it comes to the United States, bombing nuclear facilities. We have Iran bombing the United States bases across the Middle Eastern region. We got Israel and Iran continuously bombing each other every day. Somewhere at some point, somebody had to call, hey, I need more missiles, I need more weapons, I need more aircraft, etc. Who is making the money? Who is providing, who is supplying it? Do your research, make sure it's a good profit margin, make sure the revenue is positive. Look ahead, when it comes to defense contracting, and ultimately invest within a reasonable price so that you can continue your financial journey and your financial future. I'm out. Again, like the video, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue to move forward in our financial journey moving forward. I'm out, y'all. Peace.